Have you ever felt as though life itself was working against you? That no matter how much effort you give, how often you promise yourself that this time will be different, the doors just don't open. You wake up early, stay up late, give everything you have to each passing day, yet somehow, the promotion goes to someone else. The person you love walks away, or the project collapses just as it begins to thrive. It starts to feel as if the universe has marked you worse, though unseen forces hold you back each time you try to move forward. Picture it. The dim glow of your laptop at midnight, your eyes tired, your chest heavy with hope. You send out another job application, press submit, and allow yourself a small moment of belief. But days pass, and your inbox stays silent, silence that slowly eats away at your sense of worth. Or imagine standing in a room where love was meant to grow, giving your best words, your best energy, your best self, only to watch it slip away like water through your hands. These moments aren't just bad luck. They often point to something deeper, something rooted beneath awareness. Psychologists call it learned helplessness, a state where repeated disappointments condition the brain to expect failure before it even happens. It becomes less about your actual ability and more about what your nervous system has been trained to anticipate. Like a dog shocked one too many times, you begin to flinch even when the cage door opens. Neuroscience shows that the brain remembers patterns, and each setback becomes another mark in the circuitry of expectation. Over time, failure stops being an isolated event. It becomes a rhythm, a shadow that blends into your identity. You start moving differently, speaking softer, apologizing before you've done anything wrong. You hesitate when opportunity appears, finding subtle ways to hold yourself back. Somewhere inside, a quiet voice whispers, "Why try? You already know how this ends." The tragedy is that the world rarely notices this inner erosion. To others, you might look like someone who's not trying hard enough. To yourself, you feel cursed to always fall short. But what if it isn't laziness? What if it isn't bad luck? What if failure isn't just something that happens to you, but something you unknowingly carry within you, a quiet ghost stitched into your psychology, turning open doors into solid walls? If that's true, the question becomes, where did it begin? Some people seem to carry failure like an invisible mark, unseen by others, yet heavy enough to shape every decision. The roots often go back further than we think, to childhood, when the mind is soft and impressionable. Every word, every silence, every withheld gesture leaves an imprint that hardens with time. Picture a child at a desk late at night, carefully tracing each letter, rehearsing answers, hoping to please a parent they long to impress. But instead of praise, they meet a cold response. Still not good enough. In that instant, the child doesn't just fail at the task. They begin to feel like they failed at being enough. That's the moment when failure transforms from an event into an identity, whispering, "You are the problem." Attachment theory teaches that children learn not from instruction, but from the rhythm of acceptance and rejection. When love is inconsistent or conditional, the young nervous system begins to associate affection with anxiety. Neuroscience shows that repeated criticism or neglect floods the brain with stress hormones, wiring it to expect futility. The child learns an equation that feels permanent. No matter what I do, the door will stay locked. So they keep trying, smiling brighter, working harder, hoping for approval that never fully comes. Each failed attempt becomes proof that success was never meant for them. Slowly, failure stops being about grades or chores. It becomes a lens, a way of seeing themselves. They begin to shrink before they ever truly grow. This lesson doesn't end with childhood. It follows you into adulthood, into work, relationships, friendships. Every rejection feels familiar, echoing the first. You forget where the roots began, but their influence remains strong. By the time you're grown, those early wounds have become invisible scars. On the surface, you seem composed, confident even. You've built a mask polished with smiles and practiced laughter, a performance of competence. Outwardly, you may appear successful, but deep down, the same shadow still whispers that every effort will end in failure. Imagine standing in a meeting, nodding along while secretly terrified that if you speak, you'll expose how little you belong. You overwork, deliver results, yet when recognition comes, it feels undeserved. It's like breathing through an oxygen mask that never gives air. You appear calm, but inside, you're slowly unraveling. In relationships, the same pattern repeats. You hold on too tightly to those who treat you poorly, believing that even conditional love is better than none. Or you push away those who show care, afraid they'll see the failure you see in yourself. Procrastination becomes a strange kind of safety. If you never start, you can't fail. If you avoid opportunity, you avoid humiliation. This is not random, it's your mind's way of protecting itself from old pain. Psychologists call it imposter syndrome, but it runs deeper than that. It's the shadow of failure wearing your face, sabotaging your progress while pretending to keep you safe. It convinces you that you're just being realistic, that you're protecting yourself from disappointment. But beneath that logic lies the same story, the child at the locked door, still rattling keys that never fit. Adulthood becomes a quiet performance, smiling while sinking, succeeding while secretly waiting for collapse, loving while fearing loss. The mask is convincing, so convincing you almost believe it, yet deep down, something in you knows you're holding back. So why does this happen? Why does the mind cling to failure more tightly than success? The answer lies in how the brain learns defeat. Psychologist Martin Seligman discovered this through his studies on learned helplessness. In his experiment, dogs exposed to repeated shocks eventually stopped trying to escape even when the cage doors were opened. Repeated loss taught them to surrender. Humans respond the same way. When you're told repeatedly that your best isn't enough, when rejection follows effort again and again, your brain begins carving a pattern, a neural path of inevitability. Why try, it says, when you already know the outcome? Neuroscience confirms it. Every disappointment floods your body with stress hormones. Each rejection strengthens the wiring that connects effort with failure. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that imagines new possibilities, dims, while the amygdala, which processes fear, sharpens its alertness. Over time, failure stops being an external event, it becomes an internal identity. Cognitive psychology explains how the mind distorts reality to fit that identity. One rejection turns into proof that everyone will reject you. One mistake becomes evidence that you are incapable. These distortions aren't choices. They re-survival mechanisms, a way for the mind to make sense of pain that has been repeated too many times. You begin to anticipate failure as a way to shield yourself from its sting. Yet in doing so, you unknowingly ensure its return. Beyond personal experience, greater forces shape this cycle. Social science reminds us that opportunity is not distributed equally. Class, inequality, and systemic barriers determine who gets a second chance and who gets left behind. For many, failure isn't just emotional, it's built into the structure of their environment. But here lies the painful twist. When society closes its doors and your mind learns to stop knocking, you start believing the fault is entirely your own. The cycle continues not because you are incapable, but because your brain, your memories, and even your surroundings have taught you that expecting failure is the safest choice. Yet, the story doesn't end there. There's a deeper transformation, one where failure stops being an unwelcome visitor and becomes something you carry, mistaking it for belonging. What happens when failure stops happening to you and starts defining you? There is a subtle moment when that shift occurs, when repeated disappointment stops feeling temporary and starts to solidify into identity. Failure becomes less of an event and more of a companion, one that offers the false comfort of predictability. Imagine someone sitting in the ruins of a burned-down home. The walls are blackened, the roof gone, yet they refuse to leave. They call it home because the destruction, though painful, is familiar. Success, by contrast, feels uncertain, a space filled with the risk of greater loss. Failure, though bleak, is known. Psychology calls this the paradox of self-preservation. When your nervous system learns to associate effort with pain, it clings to the pain it understands rather than step into the uncertainty of change. This is why people sometimes destroy opportunities that could transform their lives. It's not laziness, it's fear. Fear that stepping into light will only reveal new shadows. Fear that if success comes, it will vanish, leaving a deeper void. In relationships, this identity takes another form. You may find yourself drawn to partners who reaffirm your old story, those who dismiss or abandon you, echoing the early voices that said you weren't enough. You know this pattern hurts, yet it feels right, because it fits the only script you've ever known. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar love. Neuroscience supports this tendency. The brain craves repetition, even when it's destructive, because repetition brings predictability. Known suffering feels less threatening than unknown joy. And so, you remain in cycles of loss, mistaking the ashes of old patterns for safety. Here lies the hardest truth. Once failure merges with identity, you stop resisting it, you defend it, even protect it, because without it, you no longer know who you are. But this is not just a personal struggle. The world around you often reinforces it, praising silent endurance while discouraging vulnerability. It is a culture that celebrates composure but fears honesty, a system that convinces people to accept quiet collapse as destiny. So the question arises, how much of this shadow truly belongs to you, and how much has been given to you by the myths of the world you inherited? From an early age, you're told that hard work always pays off, that discipline guarantees success, that failure means you didn't try enough. These stories are repeated endlessly, taught in schools, whispered at family tables, splashed across advertisements, promising transformation if only you work harder. Yet few talk about the cruelty inside those beliefs. Because when you've given everything, every ounce of energy and time, and still find yourself locked out, the world doesn't question the system, it questions you. The single mother working 2 jobs, collapsing into bed past midnight, but still unable to escape debt. The student studying under a dim bulb, clinging to the lie that equal effort brings equal reward. Society applauds determination, but ignores the invisible walls of class, trauma, and systemic bias that keep many trapped. The myth of hard work pays off becomes a weapon turned inward, cutting deepest into those already struggling. Psychologists call this internalized failure, when cultural ideals collide with personal hardship, and blame turns inward. Instead of recognizing how circumstance shapes outcomes, you start believing you're the flaw, that others found the formula you somehow missed. Neuroscience shows that shame is among the most damaging emotions to the brain. It corrodes self-worth, hijacks the nervous system, and reinforces patterns of avoidance. And shame is exactly what society feeds you when you fall short of its ideals. Then comes the mask, because while the world rewards strength, it punishes visible pain. You're praised for smiling through exhaustion, for performing stability while breaking inside. Vulnerability is shamed, while endurance is idolized. This is why so many move through life like actors applauded for composure while quietly carrying invisible grief. The world doesn't ask if you're sinking, only that you don't make waves. The weight of these cultural myths is suffocating, not because you failed, but because you were told your worth depended on not failing. Over time, these stories become walls, the prison you live within. The damage isn't only mental, it seeps deep into emotion and identity, pressing against your chest until even breathing feels heavy. It's not the dramatic breakdowns that hurt most, it's the quiet collapses. The job lost in silence, the love that fades without reason, the dream that dies unspoken. These moments don't vanish, they stack, one upon another, until the air itself feels dense with defeat. Anxiety becomes constant. You wake not to possibility, but to dread. Your mind runs through every way the day might betray you. And when night falls, sleep offers no relief, only the replay of everything you wish you could undo, the chances you didn't take. The endless chorus of what-ifs that echo quietly but cut deeply through the fabric of sleep. Then comes depression, not loud or violent, but heavy and suffocating. It convinces you that trying again would only reopen the wound. Families begin to strain under its weight. Financial stress seeps into daily life, turning dinner tables into spaces filled more with silence than conversation. Children notice it in the way their parents' smiles no longer reach their eyes. Partners feel it in the growing distance walls built from unspoken fears and disappointments. Love begins to distort under pressure. Ambition fades, and self-worth begins to erode until the question shifts from what do I deserve, to do I deserve anything at all? It's like carrying a coffin on your back, not of someone else, but of the person you once hoped to become. Each step forward feels heavier, burdened by the weight of what might have been, or it's like living in a room where the light never turns on, where even when the sun shines outside, the windows remain painted black. You move through days without color, trapped in familiar shadows that have become your only home. Neuroscience reveals that chronic stress and repeated failure physically reshape the brain. The hippocampus, the center for memory and learning, starts to shrink. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the brain sphere center, grows sharper and more reactive. Psychologists warn of the loop that follows. The more you fail, the less capable you feel. And the less capable you feel, the more likely you are to fail again. It stops being just about circumstance. Biology, emotion, and psychology begin working together against you. And yet, even in the midst of collapse, something small remains. A spark that refuses to die out completely. A fragile truth hidden in the ashes. No pattern is truly permanent. Even the deepest cycles can be rewritten. The process is slow, uncertain, and often painful, but within the ruins of failure lies the first stone of rebuilding. The real question is whether you will have the strength to place it. What if failure isn't a curse after all? What if beneath all the closed doors and broken hopes lies a keynote? One that reopens the past, but one that unlocks a future you've yet to believe in. The first truth to face is this: your worth was never meant to be defined by outcomes. You were taught that success proves your value and failure proves your shame. But your worth isn't something the world can give or take. It's the ground you've always stood on, the foundation beneath every attempt, every breath. To reclaim it is to remember that even without recognition, you are still enough. Think of boundaries as the walls of a fragile sanctuary. For too long, the voices of criticism from parents, partners, and society itself have moved freely through your mind, leaving their marks on your sense of self. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's how you begin to reclaim that space, to protect the parts of you that were never meant to be defined by others. Setting boundaries doesn't mean closing yourself off from the world. It means refusing to let outside voices control the direction of your life. Every no you speak to negativity becomes a yes to your own healing. The real transformation often happens in silence, unseen. But it's within this invisible work that the deepest changes take root. Journaling, ISNT, just writing thoughts on a page at S, bringing your hidden emotions into the light, taking what once controlled you in darkness and turning it into something you can understand. Therapy provides mirrors you can't hold on your own, helping you see how old patterns still shape your choices. Shadow work asks you to face the parts of yourself you've rejected, not to destroy them, but to recognize them. Often what you feared most is simply the child you once were, still waiting to be acknowledged. And then there are the quiet victories, so small they almost seem unimportant. Making that phone call you've been avoiding, writing the sentence you didn't think you could, getting out of bed on a morning when everything inside you said not to. Neuroscience reminds us that repetition rewires the mind. Every small step is proof that change is possible, a single stitch in a new story, showing that the locked door may open through patience, not force. Healing won't make you perfect. It won't turn you into someone who never stumbles again. But that was never the goal. This journey is not about flawlessness, it's about reclaiming dignity. The dignity of standing up again without dragging the weight of past failures. The dignity of living each day without allowing yesterday to control tomorrow. And when you begin to feel that quiet strength, you realize something simple yet profound. The real victory was never in escaping failure, but in learning to coexist with it without letting it define you. What if failure was never your enemy? What if instead of being the end of your story, it was the foundation, dark, heavy, and difficult, but rich with potential? We've been taught to measure life through success and milestones, yet true meaning rarely blooms in comfort. It grows in the quiet nights when you believed you were finished, and in the mornings when you chose to rise again anyway. Think of a gardener planting in barren soil. Season after season, nothing grows. But with every attempt, the ground changes, enriched by persistence and effort. When the harvest finally comes, it brings not just fruit, but wisdom, the kind that can only form through patience and endurance. Failure works the same way. It wears you down, but in doing so, it refines you. It teaches endurance, showing you how to see yourself not only in success, but in survival. Philosophers remind us that meaning is not handed to us, it must be shaped, carved out of experience and struggle. Neuroscience supports this too, showing that resilience isn't innate. It's a muscle built through repetition, through the act of getting up again and again. You may not control outcomes, but you can choose whether you rise after falling. The quiet victory isn't in becoming untouchable or perfect, it's in continuing forward, even as failure walks beside you. Success is fleeting and unpredictable, but courage, the courage to live, to risk, to love, to create again, is yours to claim. And in the end, that courage is what separates the broken from the transformed. So maybe failure isn't the conclusion of your story, but the very beginning of meaning. Maybe the ashes you carry aren't evidence of ruin, but the soil from which your strength will grow. If you have the courage to try again, to plant again, then failure becomes not your curse, but your teacher. And as this truth settles within you, remember, you were never defined by what fell apart. You were defined by the simple, powerful fact that you're still here, breathing, willing, ready to begin again. That quiet persistence is the triumph no one can take from you.